Prophet ﷺ says, La wasiyyata liwarith. This is one of the shortest hadith, but it says very clear statement. You cannot make a will to somebody who is one of the people who can inherit you. So if you are one of the inheriting people, then your name, even if enlisted in the will, means nothing. La wasiyata liwaris, period. So you are writing a will and you say, my son get 10,000. It's not up to you. This is distributed by Allah. But you say, my neighbor get a couple thousand. If it is less than 1/3 of what you left over, it's your right. Now, this is the hadith I wanted to recite. Now the microphone is with Brother Umair. He needs no introduction, but you can introduce yourself better than me.
I hope you guys can hear me okay.
Yeah, he's ICBC director in one of the branches here. So he is the best to talk about this. What did I say wrong? CIBC, CIBC, IBC, BCIC, I don't know. All of the above.
They're pretty much the same. So I'm the branch manager for CIBC Bank here in Prince George. Very fortunate to be here.
I do so much business with ICBC, it came to me.
We all love ICBC though, for sure.
Yeah.
By all means, I'm not here to represent the bank. This event was purely not from the bank. It was the intention. I was having a conversation with Brother Siraj about how can we help our community just to be prepared for the state planning. So there's several things to it, and it's going to sound like a bit of a longer presentation. I want you to sit tight, just listen to it. If you have questions, I might be answering those later on, so hold on to those questions till the end. Then I'll take them all for you. And if they are more private, happy to talk to you after in person as well. So we're here to talk about the estate planning today, and before getting there, I just want to talk about what is actually an estate. So estate is the assets you accumulate in your life throughout. It involves your cars, your properties, houses, jewelry, overseas, here in Canada, outside, jointly owned with your brothers, some inheritance you have, upcoming inheritance, any trust you're being named a beneficiary for, they're all considered your assets. So planning of these assets is called estate if you depart from the word, and then this whole process is called estate planning. Now, lots of people think making a will can just simply simplify this. So you have a will, you're good to go, but it's just not as simple. And I do work in the trenches, I do work in a bank. It's been past 10 years, and pretty much it's not 1 week, not a single week goes without me looking at a file of somebody who's deceased. And unfortunately, the ratio of us looking at the files of the people who were prepared is very low. It's sadly sometimes that people are actually not prepared, most of the times. So there's a bit of a goal here in estate planning. What you want to make sure is when you're planning this whole process, there's a protection of assets. So all the assets you've accumulated in your life, they're protected. And then there's a preservation of their legacy. They're smoothly delivered to the people you actually accumulated this whole effort for. So if it was for your kids, for your wife, for your parents. So the transition should happen faster because they're already grieving with that loss. And they cannot wait any longer to get their bills paid, or just to wait in the line for 6 months or 7 months to get their funds to eat. So preservation is important. And then again, efficient distribution. If you've done a really great job throughout your life saving and building that net worth, you want to make sure it's distributed efficiently and equally among your kids, or for your parents, or your loved ones you're really saving for. Some interesting fact here is that 51% of Canadians do not have a will. And then 31% of Canadians are worried about becoming a burden to their loved ones. Hence, they just don't talk about this altogether. They're like, we're going to just die and they'll figure it out. or they just have that feeling and they just never share it. Actually, 30% of Canadians do have a formal estate plan, and the reason I'm here is to increase that number for at least the community we are living in. So there's some important steps around this estate planning altogether, is to organize your affairs, to make sure everything is in order, and I'm going to go through these whole details in the next few minutes. Provide efficient transfer of the wealth, so whatever you made, it should be efficiently transferred to the people you want. It should be simplified, so if you do get time to plan it, and we all know that can come without telling us when. So if you did get a time to plan, so you should plan to simplify that process for the people you're going to leave behind. Support the tax minimization, right? In Canada, and everything is taxed, and fortunately or unfortunately, this part of the process also goes through a similar process. And then the protection of your assets, to make sure whatever you saved for, so whether it was a house you dreamed about with your wife or husband or your kids, and you want to live your legacy of life, and for some reasons your life has got short, you want to make sure they're not forced to leave that house after you die, or that neighborhood per se, right? And then provide a structure to carry out your wishes. And if you have any specific wishes, they're being structurally organized and executed after you. So the 10 steps I have here is designate a team of professionals. You cannot do this job alone. I can tell you that with confidence. So we're going to talk about what professionals we do need to get this done. Take a financial inventory to make sure we just make a list of the things together. Understanding life insurance. There's a component I wouldn't touch more on, but I'll talk about it a little bit only. Draw up your will. That is definitely a step, very important. There's a couple parts of power of attorneys I'm going to talk about. Then consideration of taxes in these states, and then keeping track of your accounts and then reviewing it regularly. So let's go to the first one, talking about designated team of professionals. So now I'm going to take a little pause here and I'm going to ask you guys, do you want me to deliver this presentation in Urdu and English, or we're good with English altogether? Just looking at the audience, if you want me to switch gears, I could. But if you have questions later on, then do ask me questions after. Just want to make sure the information does not fall through any cracks. At least on the language I'm able to speak on the other side. You can simplify, tell me a summary at the end if you want.
English.
English is good.
What's the alternative?
2 languages, I guess, at the end, maybe, or I can keep doing a summary at the end of the page for another language if you want it. But we can do that later on. So team of professionals may include your banker, so your financial advisor, your investment banker, whoever you call that person who looks after your banking accounts. So what we do in the estate planning is we make a summary of your assets. So we write your assets on one side and we write your liabilities on the other side. We call this paper blueprint. We make a blueprint of people who passed away or when they're alive. Write down everything on one side to see this is what this person has, their houses, their cars, and what you keep naming, and then these are the liabilities attached to them. And then we kind of do a simple math and what do they have left? Which assets, which liabilities attached to which asset, and what was paid that liability, because that income is now cut down. So that person is not alive and that liability is not being paid, so how are we going to get that liability paid? So then we make a decision of either we have to get that house sold or liquidate your other assets to protect the ones that are important to you. So you need to go talk to your banker, talking about your financial blueprint is what we call it, your assets and liabilities in a simple word, and some people call it your investment net worth. Then you need to, your banker could decide based on your overall net worth to suggest you to go to a lawyer to draw down a will. Everybody should have a will, but this one professional can send you there, or you can directly go to the lawyer with that blueprint, telling them that these are the assets I have, this is my liabilities, and this is my plan. Then you do need an accountant after, on the third step, to make sure that you have your will set up, you've got your assets and liabilities ready, and what are the taxes you're going to pay after you die? What is the percentage? Did you have it incorporated in your overall picture? So is the net worth you have accumulated, part of that is actually going to go to taxes? So you need to pre-plan that as well. So your accountant will tell you how can you save taxes. Rather, it could be saved by step one, your banker will be just probably mitigating that part for you a little bit before when you go there. If they see your accounts need to be joint. So if you have a single account and you unfortunately pass away, that account falls into your estate, which is perhaps going to be subject to taxes. So maybe your banker can suggest to make that account joint. So under right of survivorship, that account can be transferred over to the person you were joined with, so it could be your spouse. At the same meeting, your banker could decide about the beneficiaries you have in your bigger investments to determine which accounts do need a beneficiary, to avoid those taxes gained later on in the accounting part. Again, that could be an efficient step if you've taken the step 1 to step 3 to go back to the accountant to make sure you tell them what you have outstanding so they can make a tally of how much you will be paid. And then trust and estate consultants. This is one of the neglected ones. We don't really use a lot. And these are the companies actually. So you also need to kind of probably keep them in hand. I was talking to one of the brothers right now here. So trust and estate consultants are the people who look after as an executor. So they become you when you die. So in the will, we all know there's a person called executor who takes care of all your duties after you pass away. And if you do not have anybody after them, or if they're going through a mental trauma because they're grieving and they're incapable of doing those duties, then you could actually have a trust or estate consultant look after that. There's actually, each bank does have a trust department. There's private companies that look after that. I suggest you just reach out to the banking to know how much do they charge for this. Have that as a plan B too. It does not hurt to have them. If your spouse or your parent or your kids cannot execute on those duties and they give up on that, that clause could be added in the will in advance so there is somebody who's ready to do that job. And that is usually a big company, and then they have all these dedicated people who can do it, and they do this every day. Those are the professionals you might need to get the deal done. How do you take the financial inventory? Now, financial inventory is not very, very simple, but it could be very simple if you just put all the thoughts together. It adds on your Canadian assets, it adds on your jewelry, it adds on your cars here, it adds on, as I was talking about earlier, your joint accounts and your inheritances. Making a live tally really helps. What we do recommend is looking after your financial inventory every single year. So at least once a year, you can pick a date you want. You should be able to just get a printout from your banker and keep that handy and change it every year. So it's live documented at least every year. And it's not too old or too vague. It could also add some of the properties held inside the trust and corporations. It does get complicated and there's a lot of money involved. So people with a lot of money, when they name their beneficiaries and their trustees, they also need to do a job of communicating their trustees so they do know what's coming. And if you do not know what you're going to be responsible for, and if you're part of the household where there's complex finance involved, I suggest you should talk about that. So you should know what your duties are going to be. Perhaps if something happens which we have not planned for. The step 3 is understand your life insurance needs. Now, a lot of people do have a different take on it. I'm not going to go in detail just because we have a religious point of view on it, and I'm not very, very capable to defend it altogether. But what I will tell you is life insurance could be also used to pay your estate expenses, which could be all those trust fees. It could leave an inheritance if there's extra money. We hear a talk out in the streets that I have $2 million insurance or I have a $10 million insurance, it's going to pay out. It definitely does pay out. It's an asset too, so you need to consider that in your estate. That money needs to come and we need to decide what we need to do with that. Managing the risk of that money, it helps with that as well. And then sometimes it does replace the income. Sometimes there's a fabulous insurance out there, which again, not going to get details with, which could look after all the income you were making in your life, even after you die. So leaving that topic right there, but what I do recommend you doing is getting a point of view on that from Hershey. If you're interested in knowing what it is and how do we look at it from a religious prospect. Some people have different opinion on it, so just going to take a pause there again. If you have a question about it, or if you do have a coverage you would like to cancel, feel free to reach out to your bank. But that is another important asset as part of your estate goes, which you need to look after. Draw a will. So a will is a written document. It outlines all your intentions. It's just a plan, is what it is. It is a powerful document, so not having a will is terrible. Having a will is great. Having a properly made will is amazing. It's basically the plan of what's going to happen, what you want to do when you die, right? Now, that plan also has some important people attached to it who are going to do those activities when you die. Those are your executors, first thing first. There's a few factors when you pick up an executor too. So you need to talk to that executor you're going to pick up. So you want somebody to do the job you wanted to get it done after you die. You need to share that with them when you're alive. Lots of people don't get to know they were the executors after a person dies, actually. They're like, what? All right, I'll look after it. Okay? So you need to talk to your executor. Pick your executor also very wisely. Why I say that is, they need to have a like-minded like you are. They need to know what your objectivities are. They need to be very objective about those things. They need to be available to help you. So what are the common, I guess, helping tips there is? Sometimes we don't recommend picking up an executor when you're 70 years old to be your parent who is 90 years old, right? Illogical. We know death does not come from a number, but maybe pick somebody who's maybe younger. Sometimes what people do is they're 60 years old, they're picking up a number, and they pick their wife to be their executor. And the wife picks her husband to be the executor. Now they're both aging, and they made this will 10 years ago. And 10 years later, they're 72 or 71 years old, and now they're both in their 70s. They cannot do those duties sometimes. So you need to pick somebody who can do that, who's available, and then the other part of it is the time. The person you're picking up, are they available to do those duties? Some of us cannot sometimes buy groceries. They're basic needs, right? We're still busy. So you need to pick somebody who's dedicated to help you, who's able to put that time away, or who's going to help you execute on the plan you want. Similar fashion, you want to make sure you name a beneficiary if you will. Beneficiaries are the people who are going to actually take benefits from after your death, and they're going to get your money. It could be mostly your kids, or it could be your wife, depending on how you're going to manage your taxes out. Your beneficiaries also need to know about being beneficiary of what they are beneficiary of, instead of just keeping a secret. Why is going back to the steps we just talked about. They need to know what's coming. Your beneficiary could be just 55 years old, and they're also planning their own estate. They need to know what they have to look after if something happens to you. Now, what's more important in executorship is you also need to have a second executor. What if the executor dies before you die? Right? That also changes all the plan. So you need to be able to put another executor on there who could just be the plan B, basically. Right? If it doesn't work out, it works out this way. Likewise, the beneficiaries. Unfortunately, I've seen situations where beneficiaries dies before actually the giver. So you also have to have the beneficiaries lined up. If not, you need to know that you need to update your papers. So then also there's some directions you can have in these dates. How would you like to have this execution done on the will? So those are some of the pointers you would probably keep in your mind. I'm by all means not a lawyer. Just want you to know that these are the things you'll be talking to a lawyer, or if you're doing your own will yourself. So we're going to talk about a little bit about doing our wills by yourself too. So what essentially happens is, if you go get a certified lawyer, they do a will according to your needs. We're talking about being professional. And then they do make sure they don't miss out on any items. And then they get your will registered in the provincial court there, wherever you go in BC probably. Now, if God forbid a person dies and the bank recommends you to get that will probated, I'll talk about that a little bit later, then it helps you to have a step one done, that it was registered in the local province, but it still goes through the other provinces in Canada. But some people can make their own wills at home. It's as equally valuable as a lawyer's will is, but it's not as detailed as a lawyer's will can be. So what's worse is to not have a will. Have a will made, even on a piece of paper. Write the few things. Who is going to be your executor? Who is going to be your beneficiary? And there's another important part here for the parents like me who have minor children, to name a guardian in your will as well, who's going to look after your kids if something happens to you, or perhaps to both of the parents. Unfortunately, what happens in this country, the way it is set up, if there is no guardian for the kids, then the government takes charge of things. And we all know how fast that would be, right? In some cases it could be. Not by all means bashing the government system, but it could be very, very delayed. It could take up to 6 months or sometimes up to 7 years to pick up a guardian depending on where they are. Till then the kids are just staying at home with support workers and social workers, and nobody's making their decisions, and the decisions have to come from provincial government. And I see all the time, sometimes kids have inheritance coming, and they do not have a guardian who's picked up yet, and then they are belonging to a government office. And whoever is the manager of that office is the one who decides what's going to happen with the money that kid's parent has left for them in their life, because they have nobody to make decisions. So if this kid comes to us in the bank and says, I want to take out funds to buy groceries, and there's a clause there saying take permission from the guardian appointed by the government, I now have to wait for them to give me a written recommendation to if they can take out funds or not, which could take sometimes weeks, sometimes a few days. But till then, there's no other means of taking out funds. So if you do not have an executor, if you do not have a beneficiary, if you do not have a guardian, your kids are unable to take out funds from your account, so is your spouse's. So if the accounts are not joined and then there's no powers of audit in your life, there's nothing we can do or a bank can do. I've worked for Royal Bank, TD, and now CIBC, and I've been branch manager for all 3 banks. I do happen to have a decision-making authority for now, and unfortunately, it is useless. I cannot help nobody when there is no will. Unfortunately, banks don't let you do anything. Even if you know somebody that they truly need money, there's no fraud involved, the banks still don't let you take a cent earned from their own level. So it's important. Okay, drawing up a will, I already talked about beneficiaries. Choose whomever you want. You can choose anybody to be your beneficiary. It does not have to be your kids. It could be anybody. It could be a relative, it could be a friend. So just don't have your, mixed limited. Back to the point I was talking about, if your first set of beneficiaries die, and God forbid if it's a plane crash, a car crash, second set of people need to take benefit from the estate, or it's going to go back to the government. Time and willingness, I already talked about. Objectivity. Residency is another one. You know, it helps when they are from Canada. This question comes a lot in my professional side. What if I have nobody in Canada and I have nobody I can trust? It's okay, right? If you have nobody and you have nobody you can trust, and you don't want to put estate trust companies, bare minimum, put your brother, sister, relative you have back. It's okay if they don't have a visa. Put them on there and let them know that they are you have added them as executors. God forbid if something goes wrong, as I just spoke, it could take up to 7 years for kids to get a guardian. I think visa process will be sooner, right? Something will work out. But the will is also considered worldwide. So if you've drawn a document here, if you have added that, for some reason they cannot get here, then that they will go travel back, or they can communicate with an estate representative companies here to bend the way between the notary chains. There's a gray area here, which I guess I don't quote me for, so I don't want you to hold on to this latch. This is not a perfect plan, but add somebody from overseas. If you have nobody here whatsoever, if they are designated executors, they could communicate with the estate services companies, and they could get the decision making done by them. So what they could essentially do is you will add your brother or sister, whoever you have back home, to be your executor, has to be the one, and then you write if they're incapable or incapacitated to do it, which could be that they're not in the country, then so-and-so trust company is going to be after. Just it, right? And then what they have to do is write a letter up to that estate company that I'm stuck in this country. I do not have any forms of visas. We met with an accident. We're not able to make it here. I give you the right to execute on my so-and-so's estate according to these directions. What they do is they take that document, they put it through the local provincial court, get an approval for it. A lawyer makes a video call or whatnot. They make their judgment if it's a fraud or not. In most cases, they approve it, and then that company can execute the duties and take the responsibility. If you're signing the indemnity, if it was a fraud, you return that So a long answer to it, point blank, is add somebody on, right? So their residency, it matters. If they're in Canada, is very important. Their age matters. We've already talked about. Experience and reliability really matters too. Maybe you want to pick somebody who's really, like, you know, interested in this whole process, and they could take the most benefit from. If you have nobody there, no problem. It's fine. Okay. Established power of attorneys, equally important. You know, we're talking about death a little bit, but power of attorney is equally important. So there's two types of power of attorneys we have. One is a financial power of attorney, and one is power of attorney for personal care. Now, financial power of attorney is where we deal with most of the time. There's two types of them. If you're buying a package from a lawyer, might as well get all three done. Will, power of attorney for finance, power of attorney for personal care. Power of attorney of finance comes into effect when you are not able to come take part of your duties. When you're simply busy, or you're incapable of doing things, or you met with, God forbid, an accident, you cannot be in the bank. Now, similar to the death I just talked about, unfortunately, not very often, but in a few months, we get to see a case where, actually, quite ironically, today was a case where I see somebody who's in the hospital and they cannot come, and they need just simply money to get their family looking after their bills, because we're heading into the month end and whatnot. And if we have this document, what we can simply do is just give them access to funds. Now, when we have funds, when we have those things drawn down, when they were sound mind, they were signing these things, and if they met with an accident, we're let them take those decisions for them. It could be a local person from the city you have, it could be your spouse, and again, quite honestly, in the same fashion, if both of you met with an accident, you need to have a plan for that as well. So somebody who is the attorney to look after your finances when you're not able to, because bills need to be paid, kids need to be fed, so you need to have that. In a similar fashion, very similar to the power of attorney for personal care. We've got a few doctors in the audience right now. They probably know more than I do on this one. It's for your medical decisions. In some cases, hospitals see lots of patients where they cannot make their own decisions and they need somebody else. Now, there's alternatives to it. I'm not a professional in that view, but it's best to have it done so you do have a paper written, ready to go. So you have a peace of mind if something happens, right? Okay, tax considerations in estate planning. So there's two tax considerations in estate planning. There's probate fee and taxes, and then there's income tax consequences. So a little bit about probate fee. I was talking about your will is going to go through a process of probate. So what essentially probate is, in easy words, is a process. If your net worth is above a certain threshold, we used to use $50,000. We see a lot of frauds in banking now. We use $10,000, but do not quote the dollar value of your net worth. Just know that as soon as a bank sees somebody died, they think about protecting themselves. What they're worried about is if somebody comes and presents a death certificate right on my table in the morning, what I'm worried about is if I'm being scammed here or not. I want to make sure there's no other set of kids, there's no other set of wives, there's no other set of parents, there's no other set of friends. So we just don't basically trust that document. So what we do want to do is protect us. Protect you because you're dead, and we want to protect your assets, and we don't let them touch anything. So what we tell them is your will is here, your net worth is high, we want to make sure this is the only will existing in Canada. So that is the process. So we put you through a probate. Probate could take anywhere from about 4 months to 2 years, depending on how big the estate is. If the bank decides to put you through probate, your bills can still be paid. If there's any funeral money required, it can still leave the account. Your family still can be fed, but you will not get a chunk of money altogether in your hands. So what we do is have you go to the lawyer. The lawyer takes that document, charges you a fee, send that will back to the provincial court, and then to the old courts and municipalities to make sure there's no will in Ontario, no will in Newfoundland, no will nowhere in Canada. And that process is done in some courts electronically, some by mail. So that could take about 2 years. And the bigger the dollar we're talking about, the bigger the risk the person executing that duty, the longer the time it takes, right? So that is probate. there's a fee for it. It's about 1.5%. It averages between 1.5 to 1.8 depending on your all assets. Is the fee you get charged from the government for doing this job for you. Okay, that is the cost. If you're leaving behind $1 million, 1.8 is going to go towards this. Just remember that, right? Income tax consequences. I already talked about the probate here, so I'm just going to go through income taxes here. So, income taxes still keep on happening, right? So, for example, your TFSA, we all know here, most of us at least know that tax-free savings account is tax-free if it grows until you're alive. So, the day you die, any growth in TFSA is taxed. So, simple. And same goes for your RSPs. The day you die, the government just concludes that you are going to sell your investments. That's what happens, right? So you're dead, your investment needs to get sold. So they charge you taxes on your RSPs because they're going to call it conclusion, right? It's done, deal done, your investment needs to get sold. Today's the day you're going to pay the taxes. So you can be strategic around this. With the TFSAs, there's two ways to roll over this tax. Is one, your spouse could be added as a successor on a tax-free savings account in your life. Go back to step one to your bank. Add her as a successor if something happens to you or to your wife. She takes over that account like it's yours. So she could have two TFSAs under her name. One means yours and one's hers, or vice versa. And there will be no taxes involved. Same goes for your RSPs. You could be named as a successor, and that could be done without any issues. Rollover could also happen to your kids in RSPs. They can take over the account altogether because if they're under 18, they don't pay any taxes. If it's labeled as inheritance, they don't pay any taxes. If they're added as beneficiaries on both TFSA or here on RSPs, they don't pay any taxes. So if you do not look after this, then you could be subjected to taxes. Now, I'm going to take a pause here and want to let you know that I'm not only talking about banking TFSAs. We all have jobs, and if you have a great job with employer benefits, they also give you RSP accounts and sometimes TFSAs. So remember, those are the assets your banker might not even have an idea about, and you have not had any designation of beneficiaries there at all. And what big companies do is they don't want it like that anymore. So if you do not designate a beneficiary there, we put them all to estate of you. So when this person dies, we're going to just put everything in a box, call it estate off, and close this account over, send them a check. So that money also gets into your assets, and that's quite hefty sometimes. If you have 20 years of service with a big employer, it could be $500,000 or even $1 million. Just saying. Strategies to reduce taxes, RSPs, and RIFs. So we already talked about the rollover for the spouse and RSPs, depending on the children or grandchildren. Again, those are the questions you should be asking to your bankers. How can you actually simplify this for you, right? Taxes on TFSAs, already talked about that. There's no tax until you're alive. When you die, there is a tax. Talk about successors. Step 8 is keep track of your accounts. That's super important. That is actually very, very important, which we don't quite honestly do. The rest of the things are big names, so we all follow that. This is something we don't really follow. Keep an inventory of what you have. Keep a list of your trusted advisors on a piece of paper, simple. And in today's world, we have these iPhones, laptops, and whatnot, or MacBooks, all those fancy things. They have a password. You die, nobody knows your password, that thing is garbage now. Nobody can open it. And what wise people, lots of wise and smart people are doing these days, and they don't have time, and I'm one of those, is save everything in an Excel sheet. I'm not calling myself wise by any means, just use that example for you all. But save everything in an Excel sheet, in Microsoft Word, email address. When you die, nobody knows your password, right? So also put that down somewhere on a piece of paper. Now the banks do tell you to not share your password with anybody. Email password is not the password I'm talking about. And you're sharing this with somebody you trust. Maybe write this, put it in a safe deposit box in the bank. Somebody needs to open that email. If you bought a house and you did your sell and purchase agreement and everything is in your email, you never printed because it was 32 pages. That 65 pages you never printed is in your email. And if you cannot be sharing this password with anybody and you die, guess what? Nobody's going to get those buying documents. Nobody. There's no recovery. There's no hackers who can recover these iPhones and whatnot. They could probably, but without an hacker. So that is your digital wallet pretty much. Is everything needs to be on a piece of paper somehow, and list of people. So what does that mean for list of people? So the banker I talk about, the lawyer I talk about, the accountant I talk about, those are the people you're going to meet, you're going to make your financial decisions with. Those are the folks when your wife, your husband, parent, your kid is going through a loss, they'll be grieving, their brain will not be working to the 100% capacity. I hope that is not the case for any one of us in this room, but if this happens, they might not be able to execute at the capacity you wanted them to. You did the muscle memory, you did the exercise, but they could not still remember. So that piece of paper will have that person's name, so they can call and tell them, you are the one who is helping my husband or wife or my son or whoever, and I'm named the beneficiary or the executor. Take me from here. What happens is that person deals with people like you in that situation every single day. So it's good to have them written somewhere. What is also important is if you do decide and you have time once a year, take your wife or a husband or father or son to that person, to your banker, and meet them, help them meet them. Say, this is the person, It just helps their comfort level, right? So they remember. It's not about creating a connection, it's about the muscle memory. Quite honestly, many times I'm sitting with these people, I meet them twice, just asking them questions, and they remember things. Oh yes, we have a property. Oh yes, I don't know, right? Muscle memory. Oh yeah, that person works in that branch over there. This is how it looks like. This is the person who my husband used to go to. And it's just a click of a button, and they get your file out, and they can help them be directed. So keeping a track of these things is very important. Once a year is very good. 3 months is awesome, right? Because 3 months could change things. Sometimes they don't. A few things are to be considered when you're making that list to be updated. Is review it regularly. It says every 3 years is your estate and your will. So your will should change every 3 years, or you should at least have a look. Things you'll be looking for is, there's several reasons. There could be marriage, there could be separation, there could be divorce, there could be birth or adoption of a child. There could be a death, there could be beneficiary no longer with you, there's a beneficiary you no longer want to be the beneficiary, there's maybe the set of plantees are no longer there. Every 3 years, bare minimum, you should make sure you update that document. Sometimes what happens is a kid was born, will was drawn 15 years ago, this kid is now 23 years old, person died, they're nowhere there. Because they thought, oh yes, I have a will. They just never thought. Some people think automatically things are going to happen. No lawyer is going to come back to you up. That paper needs to be updated. So every 3 years, moving to a different province is really important too. When you leave one province and go to the other, each provincial rules change, their taxes change, your network changes, right? So you need to make sure you do look after your will. And maybe that executor I talked about was in Ontario, and now I live in BC. Right? So you need to maybe pick a new executor now, or talk to that executor that, hey, this is where I live, this is where my house is, if something happens, find me, right? And then changing financial circumstances, as we all know, sometimes we buy a business, we invest, we lose money, we grow money. So if your net worth is complex now, you need to change your will. You need to redirect everything. You need to change who's going to look after what. And the last step, guys, in this is share your plans. This is also something I've been talking throughout, and this is also something that does not happen quite often. So, document who will be responsible for carrying out your wish list. Talk to the person again and again, and I'm not mean by all day, every night, but every 3 years at least, to tell them what you plan in your will and how you wanted it to be done. So they are in loop with what you want to do. If you're comfortable, I share this, take them to the professionals, introduce them to them, so they know who that person is, so they have a bit of understanding. And if they don't like that person, they can tell you, hey, I don't like this person. I don't want to be dealing with them, or I don't want to be dealing with her if something happens to you. So maybe that is the opportunity for you to change that person. Why would you leave somebody who cannot be feeling comfortable to deal with them? And in our culture, it could be female to female or male to female, all those aspects also can come to play. You maybe don't want if it's your wife, you're dealing with a man who does not have any manners, to just scare them more or not open them up more. So just change it altogether. Maybe you don't need to. Maybe you have to, right? And vice versa, right? It could go both sides. So just consider that. And then estate planning's best practices. I'm done with the 10 steps, but the best practices here in a summary is have the talk. It's quite vague, but with the aging parents, it does not apply to everybody, but we do recommend talking with the parents. Ask them if they have an estate plan. Talk to your spouse and close family members about transparency. Transparency could go with what loans have you obtained, why did you took this loan, what assets do you have, what is the plan if you die tomorrow, all those transparent pieces, you know. And in a few cultures, we share a few similarities about, I'll deal with it, don't worry about it, right? That deal with it is going to go away, God forbid, if you die, right? Not that I'm taking your pride away, but it's good to have a transparent conversation with at least somebody who's going to look after or deal with it when something happens to you, right? And then create a plan to consider caregiver arrangements and costs. Some caregivers charge you, so you maybe want to talk about that also. So if there is a professional, you're putting them on your side, and they don't want to do you a favor for free, it's okay to talk to them. There's a cost you can pay them. It's okay. Tell them I have $100,000 you're going to be looking after. If you want some piece out of it, I'm happy to just give you an administration fee. So just do talk about that as well, upfront, and be serious about it. So they're interested. Seek financial and legal counsel about building your estate plan and have a list of trusted advisors. We just talked about that. Keep an inventory of what you have, including your bank accounts, investment statements, real estates, and outstanding debt, and store that document safely somewhere. Some of the common gaps, and I'm going to stop talking, we'll take questions, are having a vague will or no will at all. These are the gaps we see. DIY planning, appropriate, avoid its missteps. Some people are just professionals of their own, right? Which is great. It's as great as I'm trying to be a doctor of myself and I've never been to medical school, right? And I break a leg and trying to save it now, right? Or doing my appendix. I have a friend who says, if I have an appendix, I can just fix myself. He's a banker. I don't trust him, but it's okay, right? So those missteps of people think they're very, very professional. And then they overcomplicate. ChatGPT is another one, right? You just put in ChatGPT, create me a will, and then ChatGPT does a will for John Smith, who owns a golf course, and has 15 trust companies. You just need to have it tailored to you. So just make sure you read what you have, understand what you have. Just don't have that document sitting somewhere. Okay? Not reviewing your plan regularly and not updating in life events. Life events are, again, moving from one province to the other, changing houses, changing net worth, changes in your family dynamic. And then managing family dynamics. More money could be complex, less money could be equally complex. These things also happen. People have their own opinions. Make sure everybody understands what your plans are when you're alive. Incorrect documentation of beneficiary details. This also is quite often we see as the beneficiary names are not correctly added. We know that's a son or a daughter, but their just name is not right. If there's no correct spellings, they're not getting the money. It's as simple, right? Bank just does not trust it, right? So make sure that beneficiaries are named properly by you and by the banker. They sometimes do mistakes, right? They have spelling mistakes, they have date of birth mistakes, social insurance number mistakes. Make sure they are correct. And then not communicating your wishes and details plans with your beneficiaries, and that's another one where families are just grieving and they don't know what to do, they don't know what you have. How many bank accounts do you have? Now, to tell you as a fun fact, or real fact here, is people come to me and tell me, can you check how many bank accounts he has? I was like, what do you mean? I was like, can you tell me how many bank accounts this person had? My father had when they died. I was like, 2 accounts? No, about the other banks. I don't have a magic wall here. I don't know. We're not interconnected. They're like, you guys are. I'm like, no, we're not. So we can check your liabilities. Funny enough, right? How much money you owe. I know who you owe to if I have to do a check on, but I can never tell if you had an account at BMO and you forgot about and you died You have an account in Scotia, which has $50,000 sitting, I don't know about. So tell the people that where you have the bank accounts, what the balances are, they compile them in your financial inventory. Because quite honestly, I think this happens all the time. Most of the time, there's some accounts nobody even bothered taking out. So what happens to me is in the job I do, every year I get a report of unclaimed balances. And there are millions of dollars unclaimed for 10 years. And then what we do is we write them off to Bank of Canada. Unclaimed, if there's billions of dollars, something like people struggling. If somebody knew that money was there, they'll come grab it. They just don't even know. So telling them is very important. It's somebody's hard savings when we write out. Alright, I'll not talk, you guys. Any questions? Questions? Very straightforward.
I think too complex.
Beneficiaries. If you have beneficiaries who live outside Canada, how does funds potentially just transfer to them? Or is this a hurdle? Do they have to be physically in Canada?
Great question. So if the beneficiary is not in Canada, how can we get the funds dispersed to them? So the answer is you'll not need to talk to the executor who's in Canada. I hope there's an executor who's in Canada. So the banks cannot wire funds if it's the beneficiary not in Canada. The funds will stay for the beneficiary till they come and claim them in Canada, or the executor comes and gives us direction that I would like to do this job myself. So beneficiaries can claim money on their own if they're not in Canada. If they are, they can. It's a great question. Executor can direct us, but it has to be really well. So, brother's question is very good. It's a bit of a gray area there too for us, depending on the account value. But if the beneficiary is not in Canada, the funds will not go to them. If the beneficiary is in Canada, we don't want the executor to touch it. We're like, it's not your problem. This money does not belong to you. Unless it's written in the will that my executor will make sure these funds are dispersed to beneficiaries so and so. So do add that in there. Great question. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Say I have a joint account with my wife, and the executor is a different person. So what happens then? Like the account is annual design. So can my wife still access the money in the account, or it has to be done through you?
That's also amazing. Great question. So when the account is joint and a person dies under right of survivorship, that account now belongs to your wife. Executor has no control over that account. So that account is going to be out of the estate. That's a great way of doing it, right? In planning to keep this out of the estate is right. So yes. Did I? So